Welcome to Creating Change. Hi, I'm Sharon Chapman, and this is the place to be if you're wanting to improve your health, your mobility, and ultimately your life so you'll move more, feel, and look better. Welcome to episode number 14. We're getting a lot of great feedback from episode number 13 entitled Grit and Grace, about a talented lady who chose to have an elective mastectomy to reduce her risk of breast cancer. It's about her journey of 3 years and some other great tidbits along the way. Today's guest is Miss Marty Houston from Memphis, Tennessee. You will love her voice, is all I have to say. One thing I want to say about her is she is a retired Memphis police lieutenant with 20 years of experience, who was assigned to the Sex Crimes Bureau for 8 years. She investigated sexual assaults from inception through the trial process, and which is kind of interesting when you think about it. She's there in the beginning and actually is not necessarily an expert, but we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. She has assisted in adult and child victims and worked on cold case rapes after a backlog of untested DNA kits were identified throughout the country. And before becoming an investigator, she worked in uniform patrol specializing in crisis calls involving mental consumers. She's moved up through the ranks of law enforcement. Marty has lived a life of high stress, or at least it seems to me, but she's kind of taking a different career turn. She's now utilizing computerized biofeedback to assist people in correcting and healing their health and nutrition. She's really doing a coin flip, going from a high stress job and now going to more of a relaxed and a wellness state and a good level, because everybody needs a little stress. Welcome, Marty. Hi, Marty.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you very much. I think the audience is going to really love your voice is what I'm talking about. So let's start at the very beginning. You were in law enforcement, and tell us, I know you were married to a law enforcement man. What was life like in the very beginning when you he came home, you talked about your experiences. What led you to even join law enforcement?
Well, Sharon, I always had a love for the law and an interest. I started law school just a bit after I graduated from college initially, and went to law school a couple of years. During some of that time, I was a paralegal for a private and a different public entities. And I liked the application of law, but I missed the thrill that my husband was having at work. He would come home with the shoot 'em up stories and all the excitement that frontline law enforcement experiences.
Wow.
I felt my law experience was a little lackluster in comparison. So as I grew a little weary of what I was doing, I decided just to give it a try, and kind of a shot in the dark. I applied to the police department.
And they accepted you?
Well, not the first time, but the second time. It's a numbers game, but they tend to like to get their minorities and their women, and they like to get their demographics suited to the community that the police serve. So I suppose that being a female and being a minority in my city, then I made a better candidate.
Tell us the minority statistics in Memphis, Tennessee.
Memphis is it's about 62% African American, and about 37% Caucasian.
Okay. So, the one question that I have is regarding your husband. I'm sure it wasn't all pleasantries. Did he bring home the sadness and the hard issues that law enforcement people confront?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I saw in him many emotions during that time. Um, he, like myself, he likes to help and make a difference in the community and try to help people as much as they can. Usually law enforcement meets people when they're in the crisis level. So you want to help them with their immediate crisis, and then you want to try to refer them to agencies or to entities that can help them later on. But I saw him joyful, excited, at times fearful and afraid. I saw him disgusted. I saw the whole gamut of emotions with him. But what was most interesting to me is,
Go ahead.
what was most interesting is that it was emotion filled. There was passion, there was interest, and that appealed to me.
Did you have that same field of emotions as you were in those positions year after year?
Yes, I probably had more so than he did, because I'm a more high passionate person, a higher passionate. Yes, I felt so many emotions. Even the darkest ones were the most troubling. The sadness for children that weren't being parented right, the broken heart for the victims of physical abuse and emotional abuse, and then later sexual abuse.
So
And
talk to us, Marty, about, I know that you were just a patrol person, correct, in the very beginning?
In the beginning, yes.
How long did that last?
13 years.
And then you applied to be what?
At that time, I moved to the mounted patrol, where I rode horseback in the entertainment district for a couple of years.
Wow, I bet that was fun.
It was
Did you
very
see a
fun.
lot of entertainers?
Well, it was just in the entertainment district of Memphis, so it's blues and some jazz and just our little Beale Street entertainment district. But basically, it was a way to have a public relations perspective from the police department, and we were very flashy in our uniforms and our riding pants and tall up to the knee riding boots and wide brim hats. It was flashy. It's sexy. We looked good and we enjoyed it. It was fun.
I've never heard of a law enforcement saying it's sexy, but I can picture the high boots and on horseback. So where did you go from the mounted police? What direction?
I went temporarily back to uniform patrol, but very shortly after that, I was promoted to sergeant, which meant I became from a uniform officer to a plainclothes investigator, investigating crimes after they had been reported. And specifically, I chose the Sex Crimes Bureau. And would you like me to explain what I did there?
I would love to. I'd love to know why you chose the Sex Bureau division in order to go through and to advance yourself in law enforcement.
Well, there were a few options, but with no seniority, every time you move to a higher level, you're at the bottom of that seniority, of that tier of seniority. So I knew I wasn't going to get homicide or something more popular. So I just kind of played the odds. And I picked sex crimes because we had a division at that time, crimes versus property crimes and people crimes. This was a people crime. So I was more interested in helping people and victims than I would be solving a burglary or an auto theft.
Well, I know for a fact, and we were talking earlier before the podcast about these percentages, but I'm going to get it out there for our listening audience. Law enforcement in the 1980s, women were involved in law enforcement. Roughly about 8% were women, 92% were men. Now we jump to 2007, it moved to 12% were women. And now in 2019, we see 15% currently, with 4% of you actually moving up to higher ranking positions, such as what you're doing in the sex investigator position. So it seems, because of social media, we see law enforcement people doing different things, and possibly not what you as a law enforcement would be proud of. And do you kind of feel like law enforcement's getting the raw end of the stick?
Certainly at times. The media puts a certain perception out there. And with technology, people are able to video with the second's notice. And usually the videos we see on the national news are certainly the negative ones, the bad, the worst of the worst. There's so many good things that I see law enforcement officers doing that go unrecognized and certainly unnoted in society and in the media. But, just like any profession, law enforcement has a small percentage of bad cops. And I tell people that they don't seem to get it, but I mean, it's just be like your postal carriers. The bad ones are there, and your butchers and your grocers and your doctors and lawyers. The bad ones are there. It's just they don't get the publicity that bad cops get. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because I know that what we hear in social media and on TV of any kind when it comes to teachers, and that's the profession that I actually started into, is public school teaching. And you hear about the bad ones, and all I can say is there seems to be some rotten eggs in every basket, to make a long story short. Do you ever feel like you're always on duty? Let's say when you were off duty, do law enforcement people take it on themselves to, if there's a crime being committed, do you step in? Do you feel like you should be on duty due to your passion and due to your desire to help people?
Yes and no. You are always, when off duty, vigilant of what goes on around you. And I'm ultra aware, or was ultra aware of everything that happened around me. But I learned pretty quickly that it was most advantageous to me when I'm off duty to be a civilian. If there is a crime that is occurring, I need to report it just like you would, and to gather information and be a good witness. Now, when there's life-threatening, or if life-threatening activity was going on around me, I could certainly have the legal right to step in and take action. But throughout the course of my career, I learned that my civil liability would be so great that it would not be good for me to do. So certainly in the right circumstance, I would step in. But in my experience, I have not stepped in for the most part. I just made a good witness and reported to the on-duty police what was happening. That doesn't sound exciting, but it kept me from being sued.
We seem to look at women in law enforcement as a double minority. And I'm, of course, our listening audience is not listening, or not seeing you because you are a white woman. Is that true? Was it difficult to actually climb the ladder in law enforcement as a woman, generally speaking?
I don't think to be promoted was difficult, because quite honestly, they do it just like hire. They do it as in a numbers game. They promote a percentage of, blacks, whites, women, men, Hispanics, Asians, and so forth. They're federal guidelines from previous federal lawsuits that encourage that strongly. And quite honestly, my minority status hurt me in promotions and caused me to have to wait longer to receive the rank that I actually earned sooner, because it was a negative for me. When they put the numbers in, if we only have a low percentage of female whites, even if I make very high scores, once they apply the formula, it took me longer to get promoted. It certainly did.
Wow.
So it was a negative for me personally.
Has sex crimes changed? I mean, with the explosion of DNA and those kinds of things, has sex crimes changed?
Absolutely. The DNA is the biggest factor that has changed. It is amazing what can be, how the investigative tool that DNA is the biggest by far, the huge one. However, I think the perception of sex crimes has changed with, say, Law and Order SVU and more awareness about rape. I see more things on social media about, I don't know if you've seen the little video that raping a woman or having sex with a woman should be like asking her if she would like a cup of tea. It's a yes or a no. You may want to Google that. Would you like a cup of tea? If she says yes, you boil the water, you make the tea bag. If by the time you get the tea poured and steeped, if she says no, you don't give her the cup of tea. You don't pour it down her throat. You don't force it on her. You set the tea aside and she decided not to have a cup of tea after all. So there's more awareness about rape and about no meaning no. And I think we've done better to educate young men and boys and even older men about consent and touching. We teach children good touch and bad touch. So we're doing better, but we're just not there. Spousal rape still occurs. Date rape occurs rampantly. It's common for, I don't know if you know the term Mickey Finn, but where date rape drugs are used to sedate women so that men or whoever can have sex with them against their will. It's still happening at too high of a rate, but at least we've started in some direction improving that education.
Talk to us a little bit about the cold cases and how the DNA discovery has given you the ability to open up a case and find out, if someone is not guilty or if someone is guilty. How did that come about in your career?
Okay, well, first let me address why the problem occurred probably countrywide. For my department, 25 years ago, when women were raped, if the investigator didn't feel like it was a true rape, if it was maybe just the woman was a prostitute or the woman was drunk and in a bar and she was dressed in a provocative way, she may have asked for it, so to speak. So maybe in those cases, the rape kit didn't get sent out for testing. They might have been pushed to the side and the case wasn't prosecuted and we just went to the next, what they call true rape, where a stranger abduction, a stranger rapes a woman and then we send that off to be tested and, we investigate that case. So what happened starting back in, I'd say the 80s, 90s, is we had a backlog of untested rape kits. So when that came to the forefront in the last, say, 5-7 years, federal grants started being issued to police departments all over the country to test these backlog of rape kits. And when this information came out, what we were learning is, had we tested these kits and put the suspect DNA in a database, a national database, we could have seen patterns, because quite often we will have numerous rape kits that come back to the same rapist. So what happens modern day when you go back and look at an old case, the first thing you do is test the rape kit. So that DNA gets uploaded into the database. Now, how we do comparison is, generally speaking, and I don't want to misspeak, but everybody in my jurisdiction that's convicted of a felony is swabbed, a buccal swab inside the cheek with saliva, and their DNA is uploaded into the national database. So when we have a burglar or an auto thief or someone that's committed another felony, his DNA is available. Then when he gets out of jail, if he rapes someone and we get a good rape kit, we can determine exactly who he is because he's already been identified.
Wow, I didn't know they were doing DNA on other crimes.
Yes.
Well, I guess that shows you the progression of investigation, right?
Yes.
So Marty, what's been the worst case that you have done?
There have been so many, but a good example, I had a case, a little 13-year-old girl came home from school one day and walked to the corner store to buy a lollipop, literally to buy a lollipop. She went in the store, she bought the lollipop, she came out, there were two boys hanging around the store. One was a couple of years older than her and one, so I'm gonna estimate she was approximately 13, one boy was 15, one boy was 19. They start talking to her, and as she walks home with her lollipop, they follow her. When she gets about a half block or so away from the store, they snatch her up, pull her into an abandoned house, and both rape her. They leave her with torn clothing and go about their business. The little girl gathers herself, goes home, of course, reports to her mother. I was called out early evening to meet at the hospital, the children's hospital, to make sure she was physically, okay, had physical exams and tests. But my job at that point was to get a rape kit done on this child and to interview her for suspect information. And I was able to, we did the rape kit, and we did find at least one set of DNA from semen in her rape kit. But she described the younger boy, his clothing, and she thought she knew him from school. So what I was able to do was go to this, knowing the date that it happened, she described his clothing very specifically. I went and pulled the video of all the children entering the school until I found him. Then I had to interview him, of course, with his parent present, and he gave the nickname for the adult. I searched social media with that nickname and found who I believed to be the suspect that was posing in front of a home that was right across the street from the store. The address was visible on the house that he was posing in front of. That was his mother's home. Then the DNA was able to seal the deal there. I just regular old investigation got me my suspects, but the DNA proved that those two men, a boy and a man, raped that child.
That has to be hard, Marty, when it's involving sexual abuse and rape of children.
Absolutely.
So are there rewarding cases? Are there cases solved? And there has to be rewards to law enforcement. I can't imagine someone staying in it for decades if there's not rewarding situations.
There are many rewarding situations. Unfortunately, I would say more often than not, I felt unrewarded because the loopholes of the law, cases will fall through, and sometimes we don't get DNA on rape kits for various different reasons. Some of my unsolved cases haunt me more than ever. An autistic girl was, her joy every day was to go out and get her grandmother's mail from the box. And while she was getting the mail, two strangers pulled up and snatched her into a car. They both raped her and dropped her back off later. I had no idea. This was a true stranger abduction. I had no idea who these people were. All I knew was one guy was white, one guy was black, and the car was green. And the child was special needs, and she had trouble telling me whether it was light green or dark green. So when she did a forensic interview, the the interviewer they have many colors in the room, and she would have her point to the shade of green that closest matched the car. And the forensic interviewers are wonderful. They generally interview children, and they are able to talk on a level that's extremely helpful. And usually I would listen into these interviews, and then at the end they would I would be in another room, and they would call me and say, what have I failed to ask the child that you need to know? So that was good. But in this particular case, I was stumped. I had no leads. And unfortunately, the DNA from the rape kit there was not enough to obtain a DNA pattern. And that's my biggest regret of my career.
Wow. And so you're at the end of that career. Why did you get out of sex crime investigation?
I was burnout. Probably you don't really get good at the job, that particular job. There's a learning curve, I would say, until about year 3 to 5. But then about year 5, you're going to start taking a downhill turn. You're going to get burnout. You're overwhelmed. There's more cases than time. You're going to start to kind of go in the opposite direction. I knew I needed out and got out.
Now you're doing something different. Talk to us about what we talked in the very beginning about doing that coin flip from a high stress job to a low stress job. Talk to us about that. Why are you wanting to go into computerized biofeedback?
I was introduced to this concept of kinesiology and muscle testing for health and nutrition several years ago on a personal level. And I've been using it to maintain my health with some natural supplements and some practices. I was just amazed at how miraculous I felt the work was and how it could be so beneficial for so many people. After I found a lady that had a computer that did what physical muscle testing had been doing for me, I began to research and consider buying a similar computer where I could help others. And I wouldn't have to rely on a physical muscle test. I could let the computer do the hard work for me. So I recently purchased it and just now beginning my education. I'll have to educate myself on the software. There'll be certifications that I'll have to achieve in order to master all the processes that it does, all the software applications. But the reason why I want to do something like that is because it's positive, it's beneficial, it's good. I just want to go toward the light. I've been in the darkness so long. I just need something more positive and helpful and not so tragic and sad.
Do you feel like your biofeedback education, as you evolve through this process and learn more and more to help people connect, to help their nutrition, to help their movement, do you feel like this might be an open door to help those victims of rape and sexual assault and those victims with PTSD, those kinds of things?
Absolutely, because I'm already aware that it has emotional applications. The computer can gauge your body to determine the emotions that are blocking your highest health. So absolutely, PTSD victims, rape victims, anybody that's suffered any kind of emotional trauma could certainly be served by being able to gauge that trauma and how it affects their current health, and perhaps what they could do to improve that and to heal their psyche. Absolutely.
What a wonderful, wonderful concept. I can't wait to see how this evolves. So I really hope that you come back to tell us after you finish your certifications, after you begin this process, so that we can get kind of a good idea of how it can help victims of sexual assault. Before we go, Marty, is there anything that if a woman for example, is interested in law enforcement, is there anything, words of wisdom, direction that you could offer her?
Wow. I think the old saying, anytime a woman is in a man's profession, she's got to work twice as hard and accomplish twice as much to get half the respect. And that is quite often the case. My particular way of handling the profession was to never be a female that needed a man to rescue her physically or any other way. I was a strong woman. I knew my stuff. I did my part. I carried my load, if not more, just to keep that level of respect with my coworkers up. So my recommendation would be, if you're a woman that thinks you want to do this, first be aware it is a man's world. Second, be aware that physical police work, a woman is simply not as strong. The average woman is simply not as strong as the average man. So if you cannot use your body, then you must have a stronger mind. You must be smarter. You must be clever. You must use your language skills. You must be able to handle people that you cannot physically overpower psychologically and verbally. And that's what I did. I have had basically zero fights in my career. There have been people that have resisted arrest or that resisted, soft commands, but I could always speak with them and get them to comply much easier than my male counterparts.
Excellent. Nice to know. Because what you said about working twice as hard, twice as long. What was that saying one more time? Share that with us one more time.
A woman in a man's field needs to work twice as hard and produce twice as much to earn half the respect.
Right.
Of the general population of the field.
And that's rather sad when you think about it, because, I know that women have been trying to rise through the ladder in professions. And I know we're always seeking to be equal, but at the same time, it just seems that it's such a difficult ladder to climb. And I can understand how your passion must be there, because it sounds like to me, Marty, that passion has driven you. Correct?
Absolutely. It still does. It still does.
So you're going to put that passion into health and wellness, in creating connection and creating better nutrition and better fitness. Excellent for you. Marty, we want to thank you, everyone that listens to this, and even more out there, for your service and your passion, because I think that says a lot about you, and we're looking forward to what you're going to be changing and what you're going to be creating. Thank you for joining Creating Change in this podcast. Where can we reach you? And it will make sure that we put this in the show notes. If people are kind of interested in you, or they're interested in law enforcement, or they're interested in your current passion and your current direction, can we have at least your email address to allow them to contact you?
Absolutely. I would welcome any listeners. I would help any woman or any other person that would need advice or seek advice from me in law enforcement and biofeedback or any other area. I'd be happy to help them. I'm quite flattered that you wanted to interview me, and I hope what information I provided would be of benefit to some of your listeners.
Great. Thank you for joining us. And please, if you have questions for Marty, please reach out to her through her email in the show notes. We're so happy that you joined us on podcast number 14. It's been a pleasure, Marty. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Sharon.